Hello guys, welcome back to the second part of my FortiGate lab. In the previous lab we have just designed our lab in which we just add Fortinet firewall switches, users and HT web server and telnet server. So in this video I'm going to show you how to assign IP addresses to the interfaces of FortiGate and port 1, port 2 and port 3. As we see in the lab, port 1 is connected to our WAN area or a WAN zone, which is also called outside, and port 2 is connected to our LAN area, and port 3 is connected to our DMZ. So I'm just going to correct here. I'm just going to add here inside, which shows that it's our inside network, and WAN is our outside. Outside means communication to internet. So what I do now before I start with the lab, I just want to first turn on the devices. So right click on each device and click on start. So from these two areas, I don't need to turn on all the devices. I just need to turn on only the end devices, my users, to check their connectivity and the reachability of gates and end devices with each other. So okay, so before I start, I just take the snapshot of my lab. I just want to tell you how it works. At the moment, port 1 is our WAN, which is our ISP area or outside area, which means this port is connected to our internet, and if we want to access or give access our LAN users to communicate to internet, we have to go through the Fortinet, and Fortinet will send it to the ISP. The question is, this is our private IP address, and private IP addresses are just for the local area, locally configured. That means just local users, they can communicate in with this IP addresses, and not they are not pinkable or reachable in outside. It means they cannot directly connect to the internet, or they cannot directly open the Google site or the Facebook or something like that. So they have to communicate, they have to send the documents to the public IP address. Suppose it's our ISP and it's our public IP address. Every company has its own public IP address, which is routable and reachable in outside in our network area, in our internet area. That means our public address will translate this private IP address to as a public IP address and send it to the internet, and this will be our source IP address, and this will be our destination IP address. And when the internet or the Google site or the server unvoted, then answered, then replied, then it will send the request back to the public IP address, and public IP address will translate this back to the source and give it to the firewall and send it back to the LAN. So this is the way how our public IP address and private IP address communicate with each other. So this process is called NAT. So we are talking about that in coming videos. So at the moment, as we see, our LAN network cannot communicate with DMZ, and DMZ cannot communicate with our LAN, and the same LAN cannot communicate with WAN, and WAN cannot communicate with DMZ. So there are no connectivities between these three different LANs. So how to enable communication between these LANs or between these segments? We have to create security policies in FortiGate, which allows each segment, each section to communicate with each other, or to go outside and to communicate with internet world. So let's start the lab. So they have been started. So I just click on Fortinet. So as you see, I have already opened all the devices here. What I need to do is just log into FortiGate and type here the admin password. Sorry, admin user. The password doesn't have any password. We just need to set a new password, which is admin. So now we are in FortiGate console or CLI mode. So as we said that port 1 is always connected to DHCP, and it's receiving it's getting an IP address dynamically from our NAT area, so we don't need to assign statically any IP address. So how to check the IP address? There is a command, IP address list. So it's now showing me the IP address of our gateway, FortiGate. So 243. So I'm just going to add it in the browser, 243. So I think I have made here a mistake. Maybe the IP address is 243.153. It's okay. So I just need to, you see, now I'm in. So I have to put the password and the benutzername, the username. So it will asking me for the host name. So let's change it to FortiGate1 and okay. So now our FortiGate host name has been changed to FortiGate1. So what we do, we have to just take this into side. I will show you how to assign IP addresses. So as we see, port 1, port 2, and port 3 are assigned to different LANs or to different networks or sections. So we just go to network here and click on network. Here are our interfaces, physical interfaces. So port 1 is already connected with WAN and has a dynamically IP address which is 243, but we need to change it to statically. And for this one, we have an IP address with 50. So that's it, and we allow all these protocols and click on OK. So it's telling me that I'm going to be logged out from this interface because the IP address has been changed. So I just typed a new IP address. I typed the user and the password. So now I'm in admin. I'm in FortiGate firewall, and let's check for the other interfaces. So we are done with port 1. So I just go to port 2, which is our LAN area. So I just need to here define that's our LAN and type the IP address. We have for LAN we have 50, and the subnet mask we can type 24, or we can type the full address. So we allow only PIN in this interface because we just want to check the connectivity or reachability with this ping protocol. So just click on OK, and we are just going to configure now the LAN tree, the DMZ zone. So I just write here also DMZ and give the IP address, which is 50. And now richtig, then I just forget to type the subnet mask, and then click on pink and OK. So we are done with 3 ports. We have configured 3 interfaces, port 1, port 2, and just forget to write here the LAN. So it will show us here which port is connected to which network. So as we see that DMZ, LAN, and port 1 is our WAN. I just type here WAN as well. So you see we have now 3 interfaces. So let's configure the user in LAN network. So how to configure? I just clicked on the user. So it's a Windows 7. You can also upload your Windows 10 and Linux. It's available in FortiGate. In EVNG. We can download and upload each and every images in it. So at the moment we are not able to communicate to the internet because we don't have any security policy. And if I want to communicate with my port 2 interface, it's also not able because we didn't give an IP address to our computer, to our clients. Later we will configure DHCP in port 2, which will automatically assign IP addresses to the users of LAN, but now we have to configure it manually or statically. So this is the IP address, so I have already, and 50 is the gateway of our port 2. So it must now work, so let's try again. So it's not answering. So what I do, I just take the IP address out of this. I just put it in DHCP and assign it a new IP address. So 192.168.1.2. it's a subnet mask, and the gateway is always, so the gateway is always the IP address of our FortiGate interface. So I put the domain here. I don't have my DNS server, but I can take it from Google. So just enter an OK and close and close. So let's check the connectivity now with 150. It's still saying that the destination is unreachable. So let's go to our firewall and check the interfaces in firewall. So this is my LAN 2 or port 2, and port 2 I have the IP address 192.168.150, and ping, we have a loud ping in that. So in this side it must be everything must be okay. So there must be a connection, but what I do, I just restart my user computer. So let's check in DMZ. So we do the same in DMZ. We just type the IP address or the password, and I just change this to LAN user, and this is my DMZ. Okay, so let's add the IP address of our DMZ user. So this computer is connected to our DMZ area, so we have to put the IP address manually, which starts with 192.168.10, and let's take the 1. And the gateway, as we mentioned, is always the interface of FortiGate. We don't have DNS server, but I can add the IP address of Google. So that's it. So now you see it's connected to our DMZ network, and if I want to ping the firewall or the FortiGate interface, it must be reachable. So here it's answering, but if I want to ping Google, it's unreachable. I can check it also with DNS name, google.com. It's not reachable because we didn't create any policy from DMZ to outside. So let's check the IP, the connection between the user and FortiGate, and as you see, our DMZ user can also not communicate with our LAN users. So the LAN password was the IP was 15. So you see that DMZ user is not able to communicate with LAN inside, also LAN user or network, because we also need a group policy between these two, a security policy between these two networks. So that is the benefit of FortiGate, why we are using the FortiGate firewall. So let's check in LAN user. It's starting. Okay, so it will take some time. So you can you don't need to work with Windows. You can also use Linux, pure Linux, Windows, or computers which are not too heavy. They need very low resources. So yeah, I just typed IP address. Sorry, the password of my computer. So what I need, I have to now just add the IP address manually, or I have already add. So let's ping 192.168.1.50. So it's still not answering. So just go to the local area and check for the IP address. There must be the IP address. Okay, where am I wrong? I have to. It's a very we need to find out the problem. So so let's check it. 192.168.1.1, 192.168.50, and this is my DNS server. Okay, and okay. Okay, so let's check it again. So it's not working. Maybe there's a problem between the switch and the firewall, because the firewall settings are okay. Just start the switch again, and I just go back, because it's also troubleshooting. We have to find out the problem, because we have to know why it's not working, why there's no ping communication between these two interfaces. So this is the IP address of my FortiGate interface, which is port 2. So okay, so let's try again. LAN user. So I think there is a problem between the. So let's check the switch. Maybe it's a switch 3. Okay, it's on. So let's check the interfaces in switch 1. Sorry, in switch 2. I just make sure this, the ports are as a switch here. Okay, so let's ping again, or let's go to the configuration, click on properties. I think I have that everything here. Okay, so okay and okay. So let's check the connectivity. So I have to see why it's not working because of FortiGate, or just let's change the IP address of our FortiGate. I just take it undefined, and I just take another IP address. I will take here 255.255.255.255.0 and just put OK in that, and let's change the IP address of the user as well. So we just go and check the gateway, change the gateway of this user. This has already the 2, and the rest is okay. I just changed the network ID. Okay, and okay. So let's see what happens. So let's check. It's now the 50. So it's still not answering. So there must be any problem. So let's check it. So sorry guys for the disturbance. I just moved a LAN user and then add a new computer or a new PC because it was making some problem. So after re-adding the LAN user, so now I'm able to ping the IP address of my interface or my LAN interface. So but the problem is I cannot ping to Google from LAN and also from my DMZ area network. So I just give the IP address of Google, so it's not reachable, and I cannot ping the user in LAN area. So the IP is 50, and the same I cannot ping from LAN to my user in DMZ. So first let's create a connection between these two interfaces. So what we do, we need to create a policy. So I go back to my FortiGate. So after the configuration of interfaces, we just go to policy object and policy IPv4. So we are going to create here a policy. So this time LAN to DMZ. The size, the traffic coming from LAN, which is port 2, should be able to communicate with our DMZ. So later I will show you how to create addresses here for a specific subnet, but now we are just going to add all resources, and it doesn't matter in which destination, because this is the source and the destination addresses we can later define them. So just go to service here and add, click on add. So we don't need NAT, as I mentioned at the beginning. NAT is just for IP translation from public to IP address, from public to private, and from private to public IP address. So just click enable the NAT, and all sessions log allow traffic. When we enable all sessions, so the traffics between LAN and DMZ will be here, will be showed in our dashboard or in our log profiles. So just click on OK. So before we couldn't access LAN, as a LAN user couldn't access their user in DMZ. So now if I click, so you see now I can ping, but I can still not ping from DMZ to LAN user because we have just made one-way communication. So in order to make two-way communication, as you see, we can here we can only add one interface policy here, but we can solve this problem in order to make multiple interface policies. We have to go to the settings, feature visibility, and enable the multiple interfaces policies. So after enabling, we go back to our security policy and open the same policy which we created before. So now we can add here DMZ and also our LAN. So in one policy, we have created two interfaces, incoming interfaces policies. That means the communication or the traffic from LAN to DMZ and from DMZ to LAN. So let's check. Okay, so let's check again from our LAN user. So I'm able to communicate the user in DMZ, and the same if I check from DMZ user, so it's also able. But still, we cannot ping to our Google or internet sites because we didn't create a policy from LAN to WAN or DMZ to WAN. So in order to create a policy, first of all, we have to make a static route, which is for netting here, as we say in our lab. The traffic's coming from LAN the traffic's coming from LAN will go to port 1, and in port 1 is our ISP or public IP address, and it will be translated to a public IP address, and then it is able to communicate with the outside. But before we configure this, we need to create a static route. So just click on network, click on static route, and create new. So my destination can be anything because a user can access anything in internet, so I don't need to define a specific IP address or like that. So the gateway I have to enter, the gateway is my port 1 gateway, because in port 1 is our WAN or ISP network. So I found my gateway from NAT gateway, which you can find it in your VMware workstation. In each VMware workstation, there's a NAT interface. As you see here, my IP range is 192.168.153, which is also my port 1 interface range. And if you click on NAT setting, that's my NAT gateway. So if a traffic wants to go from port 1 or port 2, it must be translated in our public IP address or in NAT address, which is 2, and then it's able to communicate with outside. But we are still not done because we have only configured a static routes. But if you want to create a policy, that means if I want to allow the user to communicate with outside the world, I mean in internet, so we need to create a policy. Once again, go to policies and objects and choose the IPv4 policy and create a new policy. In this policy, I'm just going to allow LAN to WAN or inside to outside. So the traffic coming from inside, which is my port 2, and going to the outside, which is my port 1. So which resource, doesn't matter, any traffic from port 2 is allowed to communicate with any destination in port 1. So schedule, we don't add any schedule, and here we allow all the services. It's important to activate here the NAT process because on the NAT we are not able to communicate outside. So these are the security profiles we are going to learn in the coming videos. So click all sessions and OK. So after pressing OK, we have yes enabled the policies. We can also change the directions. We can also change the places of the policies. So we will do that in the coming videos. So now let's check the LAN user, which is here my LAN computer, which was not able to communicate with internet before, but now if I put the IP address of a Google, it is routable. So, and if I want to open a Google site or an internet site, it must be reachable. So if I put here google.com, so you see there's also a small problem. I cannot access the Google because I didn't add a DNS name. So what I do, I just go to properties, IP4, and I add a DNS server because it's not resolving the IP address to the name of the domain. So now once again, if we check with www.google, so you see now I'm able to open the Google site website, or if I open the Facebook, it's also reachable. This was my LAN user, but my DM set user is still not available. Still doesn't have any communication to the outside world, which is the Google. If I put here the Google IP address, it's not pinging, it's not onboarding, it's not answering. So for this, we need also a policy. So we can match that policy in one. It means we can say traffic coming from port 2 and port 3 is allowed to go to the WAN, or we can also create a new policy for that. So in my case, I just take these two ports in one outgoing interface. That means any traffic from port 1 and port 3 should be allowed to communicate with outside. So let's check again. If I go to, I just go to the lab. If I go to my user in DMZ and type the IP address of Google, so you see now it's reachable. I can also communicate to the internet. It means I can also call the websites of internet, Google, like Facebook and everything. So you see now I'm able to communicate with Google, with internet, and with outside world. So guys, this was it's the Facebook, so it must work now. It's taking some time because I don't have a speed fast internet, so it must work. But you see it's opening the Facebook page, and we can also open the Yahoo page, so it should be working. And the same if I click on YouTube, every website must work. So you see it's now calling the YouTube page, and I'm already here in Facebook. It means in this lab we have learned how to assign IP addresses, how to assign IP address to the cloud, to the users, and which gateway we have to use for the users, and how to create communication between the two different LAN, local area networks, and how to create communication for LAN to internet or to outside, and the same to from DMZ to outside. So thank you very much, guys. If you have any question, so please comment, write it in my comment, and please don't forget to share, subscribe, and press the bell button.